Hey, yo, say hello to the bad guy, Scott Hall. In Your Head Online Radio.
All right, and we are back, and now we are joined by Rick Titan. You might know him as the second raised Ramon. You might know him as the Big Titan in Japan. And you might know him now as an author and a public speaker. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. Let everybody know. We'll have the link right on the website, too. But you're at the website, RazorRickTitan.com. And you want to tell everyone about your book that's out there?
Yeah, it's actually a book about life after wrestling. It's got quite a few wrestling stories in it, but a lot of it's based on the fact of lost quite a few friends over the last 10, well, even 20 years. Mike Awesome, Chris Benoit being a couple of friends of mine that I was fairly close to, and for reasons that, I'm thinking they probably shouldn't have gone. So, and I know a lot of it's mental state. I mean, getting out of that business or any sports or entertainment business for that matter is a real trying time on the psyche, So I went into, after I finished up in New Japan Pro Wrestling, I started getting into meditation and things like that I could steer my mind a little bit better and get out of some of the aggressive states and some of the ego-driven states that when you're in a locker room 24/7 for a decade, that's how you spend most of your time.
Yeah. No, you talk about a lot of the guys have passed away, and you said for, not necessarily good reasons. I guess there's never a good reason. But did you yourself partake in any of, different drugs and stuff when you were in the wrestling business?
Not really, I mean, everyone did muscle-enhancing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely drank quite a bit on the road every night. And I don't really know that a lot of them were drug-induced. I mean, sure, a lot of them were overdoses.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them were suicides. I know that getting out of a business like that can, when you're used to all that excitement all around you all day, every day, and you've got more money than you need, and you've got tons of fans adoring you, you've got women adoring you, when your muscles are larger than life and everything else, and every day is like a big party, a big holiday, to try and segue back into normal life and get a regular job and fit in with regular people, it becomes pretty depressing. It's a really, really bland, boring, it's just depressing. It's like stepping into a dark place out of a place of huge explosion and excitement into, oh my God, I got to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
You don't exactly jump out of bed in the morning for a 9-to-5 job after you've been in the wrestling career for 10 years.
Yeah. Actually, we've asked people about, steroids and muscle enhancers, and there are a lot of people who don't say they're necessarily a bad thing. It's, depending if you overuse them. What are your thoughts on them?
Well, let me ask you this. If you go to a doctor and you're a female and you want a hormone that'll stop you from having children called a pill,
mm-hmm.
I've been told that that's exactly the same thing as taking anabolic steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And there are hormonal swings with that. There are mood swings with that. And chemicals going through your body, and it works on your liver as well. So I see a lot of people pointing a lot of fingers at things, and I have seen the ill effects, and I'm guessing everything with a reasonable amount as well. I mean, if you're taking a huge amount of any kind of drug, even something that's supposed to be, even vitamin C, it's going to be hard on your liver,
Mm-hmm. Did you
so
see
I'm not really...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just asking if you saw the documentary Bigger, Stronger, Faster.
I haven't seen that, actually, no.
Oh, you should check that out. It's a really good documentary. They actually say that more people have had health problems that you're taking aspirin than, or more people die you're taking aspirin than they do steroids.
It doesn't throw me off. I remember the old guy, the Sheik, God bless his soul, he couldn't take aspirin anymore, and he had 2 false hips, and he was struggling around, and the most minor thing you could offer anybody in the wrestling business,
mm-hmm.
other than any kind of heavier painkiller, offer the guy an aspirin, and he said, no, I can't take it. The doctors told me my stomach's too messed up from him.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I would say earlier you brought up Mike Awesome. I would just, so some people might not know you tagged with Mike Awesome and were tag champs in Japan, and you wrestled with him. What were your thoughts on Mike Awesome?
I thought he was an awesome guy. I mean, I'm using his last name for that.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just a real gentleman for the most part, and I really enjoyed traveling with him. I really trusted him. We had some instances in the ring, too, where we weren't sure what was quite going to happen with some of our opponents, being that it was a street fight match, and there were lots of language barriers, and there's a lot of safety issues and things like that, too, So not even just falling into barbed wire, but being concerned about AIDS and things like that at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we really made sure we watched each other's back, and I trusted him like a brother, and we got along great on the road. I mean, there's certain guys back when I was traveling that I would have much rather not had to have traveled with as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the whole promotion like, wrestling for FMW?
It was good. You know, at the time, you're young, you always want more, and Mike and I and Horace Boulder, who's Hulk Hogan's nephew, we really always pretty much daily talked about going to the States and working for one of the big promotions in the States. And didn't really appreciate what we had at the time. We had it pretty good. We had hotels paid for, a lot of times our meals paid for. We were making pretty decent money. We didn't really have any expenses. The bus traveled us around everywhere, so we didn't have to pay for rental cars. And as far as trusting your friends and that term brother, we were like brothers on the road. It was a really good time. You get beyond that to where you dreamed of being for your whole life, and it ends up being more like you're hanging around with guys that you don't know if you want to be around, you don't know if you trust them. And all the big stardom bits is you can make a fair amount of money on your contract for the year, but then you've got your hotels to pay for, your rental car to pay for, your meals to pay for, and everything else. And you figure that number looked pretty damn good at the start, but by the time your expenses come out of it, it's not looking so great anymore.
Mm-hmm. You know, Mike also kind of got his big break in the United States working for ECW and got a notice, and he went on doing stuff. Did they ever talk to you about coming into ECW?
I did actually go through there. That's how I got into the Razor Ramon character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
I worked with Judge Dredd there, and then I worked with Sabu there, and had a really good match with Sabu, as we always did. Judge Dredd was a big, heavy guy, so it was hard for myself to get over, being a bigger, heavier guy myself, but I did a few flying things in there to get over. Mm-hmm. And then I'd come back another time, and Paulie had me in the back room, and he says, well, here's what we're going to do in a 6-man tag. And he's all excited, and we're going to fight the Dudley Brothers that night. And I known at the time that the Blue Meanie was doing this thing, and there was the Shawn Michaels and the Diesel parody and all that going on. So I just for a joke says, well, hey, man, what the fuck you want me to do, man? And he started jumping up and down, tripping out and screaming across the locker room, and then got Shane Douglas on the walkie-talkie and says, say this to him. And I said, okay. So I went ahead and grabbed the walkie-talkie, and Shane's across the room on the other end. And I said, hey, Douglas, you didn't think I'd go to Atlanta before I came here to kick your ass, did you, man? Well, everybody knows that Scott Hall and Shane Douglas had a lot of heat.
Yeah.
And I believe the story goes, and I don't know for sure, I just heard that when Douglas was in WWE or WWF at the time, that Hall and Nash were kind of bad-mouthing him and managed to somehow squeeze him out of the promotion. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's fully a fact or not, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And so, so Douglas is at the other end of the locker room, and he's jumping up and down on the other side. He is beat red in the face, absolutely furious, because he thought that Paulie had brought Scott Hall in to work, and he just couldn't believe it. You know, his eyes were bugging out of his head. And then I stood up and I waved the walkie-talkie and smiled at him, and he just went, oh. He couldn't believe it. He was about to kick some ass, I think. And then he ran over and he says, hey, man. Well, first of all, Paulie says, can you do that out there, right? And then Douglas comes over and says the exact same thing. Hey, man, can you do that out there? And I said, well, let me think about it, because I knew that maybe a nail in the coffin for my career, just getting into the States after years and years in Japan and Austria and Germany and Puerto Rico and everything else. Mm-hmm. And then I wasn't quite sure if it would be a bright move or not. But then I thought all the guys that were doing parodies were getting over pretty good. And, you know, it'd be funny. It would be fun. It would develop a little bit more character. So I talked to Sabu. I talked to Chris Jericho, who was there at the time. I said, well, what do you think, guys? Should I or shouldn't I? And they both were 50-50 on it and want me to make up my own mind. So I said, what the hell? I'll go out there and do a Razor Ramon for a kick. And I went out there and took the mic. I had the squiggle of hair down. I had a toothpick. Actually, of all the guys there, you'll probably remember this at certain points, every single guy in the locker room had a goatee shaved in, right?
Right.
And I went in there with just stubble on my face. So I had a leather vest from Germany. I'd gotten back from Germany just a little while prior to that on a 6-month tour there. and had a toothpick and pulled a strand of hair down and walked out with my hair all gelled back and greasy looking. And then they asked me to take the mic, and I said something to the effect of, Hack Myers, I got no problem with you, man. But Dudley Brothers, I gonna kick you fucking ass. And the whole house just went right through the roof, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so apparently Hebner, or one of the referees, was there from the WWE that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were working in a town not too far from Pennsylvania at the time. And so he went back to Vince, and at the same time, it's pretty ironic how it worked. I would have preferred it if it hadn't been at the same time, actually. But he went over to Vince and told him, man, you should see this guy. I know Scott Hall just left. Everyone wants Razor Ramon back, and I found a guy we can try something with. And, well, in Vince's mind, it was more of a power thing, I'm sure, to say, I'm God, and I created you, Scott, and to Razor. And same with Diesel and Kevin Nash, and I made you guys who you are, so I'm going to go and replace you with these other guys, which the other guy, as you know, is Kane right now, right?
Yeah.
Glenn Jacobson. So we got in there, and we were treated not great, but not too bad. I mean, I would have much rather gone in there. Bret Hart got me a tryout there as Rick Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in there, and I worked with a couple of guys and had a couple of good matches. I worked with Frank Stiletto, and I enjoyed the match with Frank. He was a good guy, and he really put me over nicely. I didn't ask to be put over quite as much as he'd wanted to. And then I was supposed to do one more match with one of with Freddie Boy Floyd, one of the Smothers. Smothers' brother? Yeah, one of the brothers.
Yeah, Tracy Smothers.
Tracy, there we go. And so we were supposed to have a match. Vader went too long, apparently, and they had no space for us left anymore. So I came all the way up from Calgary to go do that and do my tryouts, and I thought, okay, well, what's going on? And didn't hear anything at the end of the night, so I thought, well, I probably don't have a spot, or they're going to think about it, or whatever. So I went home and kept going to the gym and working out, and I had some time off, and I was starting to wonder. And then I started to think, well, I guess maybe they didn't like me enough in my tryout to actually get in there, and kind of gave up on the thought. And then one day I get home from the gym, and Vince McMahon's on my answering machine, back then with the old answering machine, not the technical voicemail we have now, right?
Right.
And, Rick, this is Vince McMahon. Can you please call me at your earliest convenience? So, of course, I was 26 years old and jumping up and down and very excited about it, and phoned him. He said, at my home number, please. So I phoned him at his home number, and he says, Rick, the people want Razor Ramon back. And I own the copyrights, I own the trademarks, and I own the costume and everything else. Scott can't use any of it, and I want you to be my new Razor Ramon. It's just getting out of Japan where you don't have to negotiate, you don't have to think about character too much. It's more of your wrestling ability. I was kind of going, well, geez. I knew it wasn't going to work very well. And I knew that how you're supposed to fill somebody's boots like that has been so famous for so long and so over, and then just go and have people accept you filling that character role. I doubt it, right?
Yeah.
So I said, maybe Vince, we can call me Razor something else, or, evolve the character this way or that way. And he says, yeah, we can talk about that later, Rick, but right now this is what we want you to do, and we want you to come down to Connecticut and yada, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it all started. It wasn't something that I actually wanted to do of my own free will, but hey, you're 26 years old, you worked your ass off in Japan for a lot of years, you dreamt of going to the States, and finally you got a contract. What are you going to do, say no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, Kane was the Diesel, and they repackaged him. It was like his foot in the door. So that might have been your way in, and they could have done something else with you. Did they ever talk about doing that, like repackaging you as a different character?
No, not at all. And I think it's just politics. I can't be absolutely sure, but everyone's got their own opinion on what happened with Bret and Vince at that time, and Bret punched him out, and Shawn Michaels apparently screwed him over for the belt in Toronto and everything. I can only dream of how realistic that was, how much of a work it could have been, or how real it could have been, right? I've got my own personal opinions. I'm not going to share them right now, but Glenn was still in with the Southern boys in the States, and they had slots in the office, and Bret punched out Vince. And I don't know if you noticed down there in the States, but every single Canadian that Bret had gotten in that year on a contract, their contract ran up and they didn't get renewed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the South African Truth Commission, et cetera, Kurgan the Giant, myself, Phil LaFawn, even Doug Furness, actually, at that point from the Can-Am Express, who were a fantastic tag team and superstars in Japan, champions over and over and again, making tons of money, but they weren't brought back either, you know?
Yeah.
So that's basically what happened.
Yeah. How did the other wrestlers treat you guys, especially like Shawn Michaels, who was friends with Nash and Hall?
You know, I heard all kinds of rotten things about Shawn before I even went there.
Yeah.
So I was a little trepidatious as to what to do or think about him when I walked into there, but he was super cool to me. I have to say, he actually taught me how to throw the razor punch because I was used to working really stiff-looking punches in Japan. And with that floppy disc punch he threw, you know, it was actually really hard to break the habit of throwing a stiff punch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working for the character. And then Shawn pulled me aside. He says, "Hey, man, I knew Scott really well." And I'm like, "Of course you knew Scott. I know who you are." Right? And he goes, "You throw the hand up in the air first, you measure up, and then you throw the punch kind of like this. That's how you do the razor punch." And I said, "Okay." So I tried it a few times with him. He says, "That's it, man." And I was blown away, actually. He walked away. He was all happy he taught with the younger guys. And I had the new punch down for the gimmick and the character. And all the blood had actually drained out of my face. I couldn't believe it. But always a good guy to me. I never had a problem with him.
Yeah. Now, the first night you came out as a character, you know, the fans, what did you think of the fan reaction?
I kind of knew what it was going to be like ahead of time. You know, nobody wants to see it's like having a stepmom or stepdad, right?
Right.
The kids aren't going to like that person. They want their original mother or father back. That's just the way it is. I already knew that was going to happen. I was hoping in time. I had a few ideas like that character that Antonio Banderas had played in Mexico. It's escaping my mind right now.
Desperado?
Desperado, that's it. I was thinking, and I mentioned Vince one time about transforming things into that kind of a character so that it was a little further away from the Al Pacino Scarface type gimmick, right? And maybe the fans could start leaning over. It really worked well in Memphis, Tennessee. We'd gone down there for USWA after we were on TV and WWF for a while. And Lawler had turned me babyface against Kane, Glenn. And it worked out. They popped huge as me coming out and dropping the gimmick and turning babyface on them. And from there on in, I was working as a baby and getting lots of cheers. And I was hoping at that point I could, and then actually change back to Rick Titan, my Rick Titan character that I created years ago. And that got over, and I thought maybe I'll be slipping back over into the WWF and working my own character now. But the contract ran up, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. Barbie, do you have a question?
Yeah, absolutely. You're a member of the NWO Japan, and I was just wondering, was it as different as the WCW version was, or was it played more traditionally for the Japanese audience?
I'm not sure I quite understand. Traditionally in what sense?
As like a pro wrestling angle. The NWO was kind of had the funky promos, and they were kind of they weren't traditional heels in the pro wrestling sense. I mean, how was that played in New Japan?
Yeah, it was pretty much exactly the same thing. Masa Chono had always been a big baby face out there for a long time. You know, and then he turns on a bunch of people and joins NWO Japan and kind of changes his character into more of a cool, laid-back mafioso character, right? And he's got his troupe, and they're always doing run-ins and things like that. But Chono was, and in that culture, you're right, it's kind of strange, but he pulled it off where he transcended the traditional roles, and probably one of the first guys to ever do that out there, right? So they loved him to death. We were treated like baby faces in Japan, but we were NWO, so we were kind of the cool kids in high school, sprayed graffiti everywhere and beat everybody up, right?
Yeah. What would you say, like, the craziest thing you saw when you were wrestling in Japan? FMW had some wild stuff going on.
It's hard to say, because I never worked in one of those bomb matches.
Yeah.
And I know the barbed wire matches are, when you get thrown into that stuff, it's a shoot. You get torn up. I always tried to stay out of it as much as I could. Mike Austin would get wrapped up in barbed wire and thrown into it again and again, and he's bleeding all over the place, and I was tiptoeing around it, and I'd watch myself on video afterwards laughing at myself, But there's that AIDS fear going on, too. I didn't want to bleed if I didn't have to.
Definitely.
So, yeah, but I believe Tarzan, Goto, and Onita, probably in one of their no-rope death match, barbed wire bomb matches that they had rigged up. I think it was a cage, too, actually. And they had legit C4 explosives, but I'm not sure how they had it rigged. You know, I mean, I'm sure that there was somebody backstage or around the ring that pressed off the button and they'd bump into the thing and then stay just far enough away, or how much C4 explosive was actually packed in. Can it impact the skin or not? Or is it just going to spray a bunch of black crap and sting for a second? I don't really know the extent of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they bladed like crazy, and they're just bleeding massively all over the place, and it was almost enough to make me gag or throw up. And they're Onita, it's so funny because I'd never seen him do this with anybody else, but it was such an important match that they had built up to for such a long time for the kind of the king of FMW at the time. Onita picked him up 3 or 4 times and powerbombed him right in the back of his head.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, there's no way that he could take a bump and save himself, or it looked like he was breaking his neck every time he did it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But Goto's a tough bastard, too, so... between the bombs and all the blood and then him getting stuffed on his head 3 or 4 times, we were all standing backstage going, oh my God. And when you can pop the boys, you can pop anybody, right?
All right.
Were you there the night that Sabu and the Sheik just literally set fire to the ring and had to run away 2 minutes into the match?
Yeah, and I think it was a little bit over. It wasn't as big of a deal as everyone made it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite sure if memory serves me correctly. It was a gimmick. It was on purpose. But maybe I'm wrong there. I can't fully remember the story of that. But I think it wasn't as big of a deal as he made it out to be, though.
Okay.
I think it was very controlled.
When you were part of the NWO in Japan, was there ever any talks for you to come into WCW?
We bantered things back and forth when I was in NWO, and it's one of those things where everyone's, yeah, rah, man. And at the time, it's almost like a bunch of buddies getting together and getting drunk, blabbing a bunch of bullshit back and forth to each other, right? Yeah. I mean, what's going to happen the next day? You're really going to sign that contract and do the business deal tomorrow after talking drunkenly the night before about all these fantastic, amazing, world-changing things happening, or is it going to be completely forgotten and you're just going to go through your day in a hungover stupor and forget about everything?
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that, I think. I don't know if there was any real serious talk of me going over there, and I think that I don't know what would have happened with Scott being there at the time and him being really over and me just playing his old character, how that would have worked either,
Did you ever meet with him?
I actually never met the guy.
Yeah.
I met almost everybody but him, and I believe when I was in, I think it was Sean or X-Pac that said to me, yeah, Scott's got some old tights and stuff. He says if you want him, give him a call. And I actually thought about it because I needed some new colored trunks and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the girls backstage gave me a pair of his old trunks, and I was 285 at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't even get them halfway up my quads.
Did you ever hear if he was mad at you about it, or what he thought about the gimmick?
I believe he was so confident in what he had already accomplished and gotten out of there, and he pulled off the Razor Ramon thing fantastically, right? Mm-hmm. He knew that I wasn't going to pull it off the way he pulled it off unless I had a decade ahead of me to work on it still. Even then, I would always be considered the second or the phony or whatever you want to call it. So, and then he went into WCW. I mean, it's sort of like a kid in kindergarten trying to kick you in the shins when you're the big, huge college football player. Huge star with Kevin Nash as part of the NWO and Hogan transferring over. He was untouchable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I didn't hear anything about him being pissed at me, and I also didn't hear, as far as he was probably concerned, he was the king of the universe. Who cares?
Right. Incher, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a question from Johnny Moxie on our message board. He wants to know, out of all the people you faced in Japan, who was your favorite?
My favorite? It's a tough one. There's a lot of different qualities and different wrestlers, but when I would say in Japan, do you think he means a Japanese wrestler or anybody in Japan?
Probably, I'm not sure. Probably Japanese wrestler.
Okay. See, the most athletic, most fun person best character, best timing, best gimmick. That's a real tough one. I loved working with Hashimoto, but that was a real hard physical match. There were certain things I didn't enjoy about it, such as the pain.
Yeah.
And I loved working with Onita because Onita's sense of timing, his psychology, his selling, his fire and his comebacks, everything that we did together gelled really well. So it seemed like a well-oiled dance between him and I every time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess when it would boil down to it, I'd probably have to say Onita.
I read that you had a school with Bad News Brown for a while. What was Bad News like? I've heard a lot of stories with him.
It's really funny because he had gotten out of wrestling not too long before that. And he still had some of the wrestler mentality like I did. We respected each other with that. But I think even over a year, he learned to trust me. I learned to trust him more, and he softened up a bit, became a grandfather as well. I think that'll change you. Mm-hmm. And we got along really well. Never had a single argument. And trained some great guys. Raj Desi, Tiger Raj Desi's now in the WWE. We trained him from the first bump on up. Mm-hmm. And yeah, really great guy. Really trusted him, and he always took care of me. I always got his back, and we got along quite well because of that.
Yeah, I always thought he'd be a guy, if he would have came around a little bit later, like in the late 90s, he would have been even bigger, because I don't know, he just seemed more of a realistic guy, and I think he would have fit in with the kind of the Attitude Era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was a shooter for sure. I'd seen him challenge all kinds of people that, you know, if they really tried to screw with him, they always want to knock off a tough guy. But I've seen in Calgary with some pretty heavy guys here, he told them, come on, get over my face, I dare you, I'm going to huck you right through that wall. Yeah. And they backed off. I'm talking really heavy guys in Calgary, you know. Uh-huh. And also guys in the ring and around the business. I mean, everyone had a huge level of respect for him, and they knew how tough he was, and you know, he stood up for what was right. Mm-hmm. He didn't screw with people. He wasn't unfair.
Mm-hmm. The blue guy here in the chat room wants to know what were your thoughts on Jim Ross.
Jim Ross, he was a nice guy. I think he was all business, which there's nothing wrong with that either. I don't think he had anything really invested in bringing us in. Thought he'd maybe give it a try and see what happens, and then he faded out of that whole storyline and character again. And you know, it's the whole business, and it's almost any business. Try something, see if it works. If it doesn't, get it up and turn your back on it. Try something else, right?
Yeah.
But Glenn and I were sort of left in the dust because of that too.
Mm-hmm. Have you talked to him since he became Kane? And
we spoke a bit after that, and then I went and visited over at one of the shows, one of the times when they were coming through Calgary here, and he's, you know, everything's good and fine. What I find is a lot of the guys in the business, when you get out of there, it's like you're not part of the inner circle anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So you can phone them 3, 4, 5 times, and I try to get rid of my pride and stuff, and I've worked really hard on my own ego and really transformed myself in my life over the last few years, the practices I've been doing. But I have my pride as well. I'll call somebody 3, maybe 4 times, and if they don't call me back, then I just can't be bothered either. I've got other things to do in life myself, right?
Right.
And that's kind of what it becomes like. If you're not part of the troop, then they don't bother with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll let everybody know again, your website's RazorRickTitan.com, and you've got the book, Wrestling with Consciousness. Anything you want to tell everybody before I let you go?
Yeah, really the book is based on getting out of the business and practicing meditative practices, which to some people sounds really hokey, but it's so good in the sense of you can lower your blood pressure, you can lower your stress levels, you can practice anger management through it and get through all that. I mean, there's so many fantastic positive things that you can do for your life through those things that I learned over the years, the last decade or so, that it really reversed the ill effects that wrestling may have had on me. Like I mentioned before, powerful, ridiculous ego to where you think you're the center of the universe, and anger issues where you just blow your gasket on the littlest of things because you're riding a power trip for 10 years, and your formative years when you're 21, you know, through all the way through your 20s, you're trying to find yourself and figure out who you are and how you are and all that. And when you're being screamed at by thousands and thousands of fans every night, you get a real distorted view of reality. And even with your own family and going and visiting your parents and things like that, you tend to think or act like you're just too cool for everybody. And that's not the way life works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why a lot of the guys become so dysfunctional after they get out of the business, too. They don't want to have a grip on reality, and they don't want to see things as they truly are. They have this diluted view of things, and I can say that because I'm speaking from personal experience. And that's mostly what the book's about, wrestling with our consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our levels of behavior and who we are at the core, and how we want to be, and how we want to integrate with society, and what kind of a life we want to live, and where we want to be in our headspace, and how positive we want to be, and have great interactions with other people and relationships, and keep everything at the peak that you possibly can. That's what the book is basically about.
Do you think there would be a good read for a lot of the wrestlers, too, who get out of the business?
I really think so. Again, when I know being back in that state when I was there, that I didn't want to listen to any of that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need that. I know what I'm doing, and it's not like that. I'm different. I'm special. Well, okay, fine. And maybe my book's not the right one for certain individuals as well. Everyone's got their own path, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know for myself, if I had read it halfway through the industry, my life would have been way easier, and things would have transferred around a lot faster, and I would have been a lot happier guy when I turned 29, 30, and for the next couple of years after that. I wouldn't have had all the obstacles and problems and issues and difficulties that I had trying to integrate back into society afterwards. It would have been a lot nicer for me if I knew what I knew now, already in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you for coming on tonight, man. It's been good stuff.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Cool.
Sit back and listen, fat asses. You're listening to the original Mac Daddy, original Dog of War, the Pit Bull, and you're listening to In Your Head.